absolutely delighted to be joined by Bonnie Low Kramen. Most of you will know her. I don't know many of you who won't, but Bonnie is a TEDx speaker, trainer, and author of Be the Ultimate Assistant and her much anticipated new incredible book, Staff Matters. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Nikki. It's awesome to be here. And I feel like we know each other, even though we've never been in a room together.
I know, we have to get that sorted soon. We have to be able to jump on a plane somewhere. Well, I want to start by talking about the new book. I know that many of our attendees will have seen it, purchased it, and read it. For those who haven't yet, I encourage you all to buy a copy. Bonnie, why don't you tell us why now was the time that you decided to write Staff Matters?
Right. Thanks, Nikki, so much. This book has been 7 years in the making, and probably longer if I really thought even harder. I have like so many folders and files, but this is the end product. It ended up being 400 pages. It's pretty thick. It's double my last book. And it's this big because it's bringing together the people of our workplace. I'm sure, like you, Nikki, I have a lot of leadership and management books in my collection, and they are about leaders. But I didn't see the book that brought together the assistants of the world and the HR professionals and the recruiters and business school professors. All of those groups I see as the constituencies of the workplace. And if we agree that there are aspects of this workplace that are broken, no one of those groups can fix it alone. So that's why I decided to bring us all together in this book. In the work I do, I travel the world. In a million years, I never thought that training assistants would bring me to 13 countries, but it has. And in all of that traveling, I've spoken to, I think it's fair to say, thousands of assistants, but also leaders and recruiters and HR people. And they've told me their stories, and I've been writing them down and taking notes and interviewing them. And what I'm aware of, and perhaps this is true for you as well, I am very aware that there's a lot that's going unsaid in the workplace. There's a lot that leaders are not privy to because their staff is afraid to tell them. And that is deeply concerning for me because I'm aware that leaders are very busy making decisions right now in the post-pandemic world, decisions that are going to have ramifications for the next decade. And I believe many of those decisions are being made without full information. I call it the quiet parts. Like in my book, I say the quiet parts out loud, the issues that are slowing staff down, stopping them dead in their tracks, and preventing them from doing great work. And that is a lose-lose situation for leaders and companies, et cetera. So I couldn't stay silent. And I certainly, I needed to not be afraid to say the quiet parts out loud. So that's why I wrote it.
Yeah, and you absolutely do in the book. I was saying to you before we hit record just how brave I think that you are, having put this book together and talk and discuss some of the issues that, exactly as you said, that we're not talking about, that we're afraid to talk about. So in this session, we're absolutely going to dive into some of those conversations. Sure. Because I think they're so important. Before we do that, I wonder if you could set the scene a little bit around some of the research that you've done that also comes up in the book about where we are as assistants in the current landscape, post Me Too, post Time's Up, after the pandemic. Where are assistants now, as you see it?
The profession is in great motion right now, but it's a very exciting time. I don't think there's ever been a better time to be an assistant than right now, but I also think there's never been a more complicated time to be an assistant than right now. I mean, in a million years, we wouldn't have bet that if we rolled back time to February of 2020, none of us thought that the workforce would be sent home for not even, most assistants were guessing 2 weeks or maybe 2 months They certainly weren't guessing 2 years, but guess what? The assistants of the world were among the best equipped to deal with that pivot. They had to pivot fast. Some had, a day's notice that, yep, you're going to go home and you're going to open a home office and you're going to do your work in support of your leaders over a webcam and over Teams and like fast. These assistants had to pivot. Well, do you know who didn't do very well in pivoting were the leaders and HR. The truth is that they're still in chaos, that there's still a lot about the workplace that is chaotic. And who is calming the chaos? It is the assistants of the world. If the pandemic did anything, it's shown a very bright light on the glaring gaps in the workplace, the places that were deficit. Early in the pandemic, there were companies that could not hire any new people. They needed them, but they couldn't hire them. Why? Because they had no way to onboard them virtually. And so assistants in 2023 are really leveraging and morphing and evolving their roles, getting involved in hiring and interviewing, not only assistants, but new executives. They're getting involved in technology training. They're getting involved in onboarding systems. They're getting involved in the creation of more robust and responsive disaster planning, because I'm not sure there's any of us who believe we have seen the last of the disasters. We now know we've got terrorist events. We have natural disasters of the incredible weird weather we've got going on. And now we have this health crisis disaster. And I don't know that there's anyone who doesn't believe we could do all of that better. So assistants are seeing the gaps. They have a front row seat for where the gaps are, the places for improvement, and they are raising their hands and coming forth with solutions. And I'm very excited about what I see. So, and let me just say that there have been some news articles recently, making noises about, here we go again, that assistants are getting laid off and downsized, and there are going to be less of them. Well, I get called by recruiters weekly. The job market in the United States is very strong for executive assistants. The titles are changing. Yes, it's in very big motion, but then so is HR. I believe times of change are times of opportunity, and I'm very encouraging for assistants to seize the opportunities that are right in front of us, because there are a lot of them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's exactly that. The way that you said that at the end there is leveraging those opportunities, because I think you're absolutely right. They are there. And since the pandemic, I think it's shown how courageous assistants are and how pivotal they are to helping their executives navigate these, times that we don't even know that, what's going to happen next.
Right.
It's leveraging those opportunities. So how can assistants go about making sure they don't miss them?
Well, that involves talking to one another, and that's a bit of more of a challenge these days, because we're no longer in a physical office with one another, maybe but 1 day a week, 2 days a week. It's very fragmented and fractured. And that is a challenge for sure, but it is a solvable challenge. We need to make sure we are talking with one another to, check in and compare notes and actually have conversations. That's why it's critical for, leaders like you to bring the community together in the way you do with Practically Perfect PA. And that on social media has been a game changer when it comes to this, because we now have the ability to share information, the same information, quickly and in a very powerful way if people are accessing it. We have a profession filled with creative and innovative subject matter experts, SMEs. And it is about coming together in collaboration and cooperation to understand what's happening in different companies and working together to come up with a plan. do you see what I see? Is that, should we, come up with a proposal to fix this, whatever this is, the onboarding system, the disaster plan, the deficit in training. I mean, there are so many places for improvement. Assistants do well to mentor each other, to talk with each other in lunch and learns, in however you can come together. I urge you to do so. The big risk factor in this current workplace is the invisibility factor. There's a thing called proximity bias, which I'm deeply concerned about, that women especially need to be noting. And that is that there is an advantage that people have if they physically are in the office, near having proximity to leaders as they're making decisions, as opposed to being at home, choosing to be at home, even if your company endorses it. It's important to be present on webcam and to show up the way you want to show up professionally and how you want to be seen and to be heard. It's important that even if you're working remotely, that you be seen and heard and that you are not invisible, because it's really hard to advocate for yourself if you literally are invisible.
Absolutely. It's such an interesting topic, because I know when the pandemic did hit, assistants were so, particularly all of the assistants that we were training in our community, they were so happy to finally have had that flexibility to be able to work from home, because they had for so long had asked for maybe a day a week to work from home and were never given that opportunity, because everybody said you have to be close to your executives in the office.
Exactly.
So when they had it, everyone was jumping for joy. It helps, particularly as you said, the majority of assistants are women. The most of the household work falls on us. So absolutely, it was great. I get a little bit of flexibility, that I have my responsibilities at home that I can deal with as well as working. And that's still the case. We still are doing the bulk of the work at home. But it's exactly as you said, now people are going back to the office and men have got that sort of easier ability to go back.
They do.
Then this whole proximity bias comes in. So it's quite a frustrating place to be now, that for a lot of assistants, it's like, well, I'm kind of got used to having that ability to do stuff at home, and now I have to go back to the office because my career needs it. It's a difficult one. I know, and a lot of our assistants are navigating that now.
Exactly. And it's not one size fits all. I just feel it's my responsibility to raise it as a concern. In fact, it was a female CEO out in California who alerted me to this. She said, she actually said, what I'm worried about? I'm worried about women being invisible. And so here we go again with men having an advantage. I mean, the data is, I just wrote an article for an HR magazine. The data shows that women still, in general, do 6 hours more of housework a week than men do. And men are choosing to go back into the office. They probably have someone doing that housework. So I that's an old conversation that bears discussion, if we want to go there. But nonetheless, the assistants of the world are nothing if not realists, that it is our job to look at the hard truth and the messy reality in order to clean up the mess. And the great thing about assistants is that you're great at cleaning up messes. You just are.
Yeah, it's very true. Well, I want to touch on some of the topics that are within the virtual summit that we're attending today, and that's the relationship between an assistant and their executive. And I love the aha moment that you had in the book, where you talk about how little training executives or managers get when they start as leaders in organizations. I think a lot of us know that to be true, but the fact that it's written down on a piece of paper makes you realize that how true it actually is and how worrying it is. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that and how that kind of fits in with the whole relationship with an assistant.
Were you surprised at the number, Nicky?
I was, to be honest, but
you were.
But when I thought about it, I thought, I don't know any of my executives who went on leadership training or anything specific.
Here it is. What I became aware of is when a trainer asked an audience of assistants, how many of you feel well managed by your leader? And it was shocking to me how few raised their hand. Very few did this, like with real enthusiasm. Most were like, sort of, maybe a little bit, maybe one. It was so half-hearted, and enthusiasm. And that made me start digging into, well, how do leaders learn how to manage people? And the obvious place is MBA programs, business programs. And that was the 2x4 on my head when I read the article in Harvard Business Review by Jack Zenger, who I now know and I'm in regular correspondence with. I've seen him speak. And he and his team figured out that the average age that a leader gets their very first training in managing people, in 2012, the age was 42. And in 2021, when they repeated the poll of 70,000 leaders around the world, the age has gone up to 46. So you don't have to be a math wizard to figure out that most leaders are out of school more than 20 years before they get their first training in managing people. And so if assistants are lying in bed at night at 2 a.m. thinking, wow, I could do this so much better, or like, why are they behaving like this? Or why is that happening? They're right that, leaders don't know what they don't know. And when I asked Jack, so Jack, what do we do about this? What do I tell the assistants of the world who are trying to support the people, the men and women who are coming out of those business schools and don't know how to manage them? And he said, tell the assistants of the world they need to manage their managers, which means coming to the meeting with a plan, with not asking, gee, what do you need me to do? But actually being a partner and, someone who's in their inbox and knowing what's happening. And when I say that, when I tell this story to the assistants of the world, there's rarely a workshop that I don't tell this story. They get it. The light bulb goes on and it's like, oh, just like it happened to you. It makes sense. And as it did for me, it explained everything for me. And so it's not that leaders are trying to be mean or nasty or clueless or oblivious. It's that they've never been taught how. They know they know a lot about international finance and they know about accounting and macroeconomics. What they're deficit in is emotional intelligence and how to understand the difference between how you manage women versus how you manage men, how you navigate between an introvert and an extrovert, those kinds of things. And nobody taught them how to manage a workforce that's hybrid and working partially from home and partially in the office and varying from week to week. Like, you think that the assistants of the world have been, thrown and it's very stressful and uncertain. Well, let me tell you, the leaders of the world have been equally thrown, and HR wasn't prepared for this either. So when assistants hear this, my excitement is that assistants have an opportunity to manage them and set themselves up, if they want to, for promotion and leadership. And that's why we're seeing many assistants rising to who are great at managing others, that they are becoming chiefs of staff. They're becoming directors of administration. And why? There's a need. That's my message, Nikki. Look for the need. Look at the gaps. Where are the places for improvement? And that's the key to the future workplace, in my view.
It's something that I say to assistants as well. You quite often hear assistants say, I work for an executive who other people find difficult to work for, or they're not really people executives, they're not leaders of people. And I always say that's exactly where you should be positioning yourself then, as you're that bridge between the staff, the rest of the staff, and the executive. It's such a wonderful way to be seen and elevate yourself when you're the person that the staff can go to when they're scared, when the scary executive, they don't want to go there. I think that's a really nice place to be.
I'll say to assistants, is it true that people will say things to you, the assistant, that they would never say to your leader? And it always gets, big nodding heads, and that's a big fat yes. And so that means that assistants automatically have more information than their leaders do, and that makes you valuable. So that's why in the book, Staff Matters, it is about urging leaders to take a fresh look at the people who are already on the payroll. They're already paying all of this staff. What they're not doing is fully leveraging and utilizing them, because it's not just about a job description. It's about what they know, which is a lot, all that institutional knowledge that they have in their heads, and who they know. Because the assistants of the world certainly know who to call, who's got the answer, and they can do it pretty quickly.
There's a whole chapter in the book as well, which again, I keep coming back to the book, and I really hope everyone can pick a copy of it up, because there's so many brilliant nuggets of information in there. But there's a whole chapter around, and I know that so many of our attendees will be nodding away furiously at this, the chapter around not asking the assistants when they make huge decisions in the boardroom that are just not workable. And I know there will be so many people saying, that's happened to me, that happened last week. Oh. So can you talk to that as well? Because I think it's very true, but I wonder how assistants then use their voice to go to their executives or whoever it happens to be and say, this isn't going to work.
Exactly. The chapter is called Ask First. And it came, it originally, it initiated, there was a conversation. I was in New Zealand at Lucy Brazier's conference, and at lunch, there was like this almost yelling conversation at lunchtime, because there was an assistant there furious that, and this was pre-pandemic, that the leadership in some office 1,000 miles away made the decision that it would be smart to knock down all the walls and make everybody an open floor plan. And nobody asked the assistants. And she was the assistant to the CEO, and she was infuriated because one day she came in and there was a construction crew, and they said, oh yes, you have to go work downstairs because we're just knocking down everything. And she had no recourse at that point. And her attitude was, I can't be in an open floor plan. I can't have people hearing my conversations, seeing my computer screen. Like, I have to leave the building to go have a private conversation that's confidential. It just wasn't workable. And so what ended up happening, there was such an uproar among the assistant staff so they spent thousands of dollars knocking down all the walls. Then they had to have meetings to figure out, well, what's the solution? Because there was such an uproar. And then they had to spend thousands of dollars more to create a hybrid situation where there were some private offices and some open floor plans. But there are so many stories in the book. What I see in real life, our leaders are skipping over that step. They're skipping over. There's rarely a person who doesn't know the feeling of having a decision made for you that directly impacts you, but you are not consulted. I mean, the assistant who already supports 4 leaders and on Friday afternoon receives a text message from HR on her cell phone that says, oh, starting Monday, you're going to be supporting John Smith too, in addition to your 4 leaders. And her attitude is, wait a minute, I'm already burning out. I'm already overwhelmed. I can't possibly have a 5th person. I'm going to keel over. But nobody asked her. So what does that feel like? It's disrespectful. And in the end, it's not smart. What? So if leaders are thinking, well, that speeds up the process, if we just go ahead and make these decisions, it is detrimental, damaging to an organization to do that. And so I try very hard to give solid examples of what does that look like, of the asking. And, might it slow down the process of decision making? It might. Will it impact the decision? Probably. And even if it doesn't, is it worth asking your people who you painstakingly hired in the first place? 100%.
It's stakeholder management, isn't it? But it's interesting how, we all know that. We all know when you make a change or make a decision, you have to go around and make sure that you have buy-in from everybody. But leaders, maybe forget that step, or it's just not part of the
It
process.
seems simple on one hand, but honestly, Nikki, the world over, I have heard the frustration of staff who feel so disrespected by this. And honestly, if we know that the Great Resignation happened, well, that's in large part one of the reasons why.
Yeah,
No
absolutely. Just not asked. Yeah. So how do assistants find the courage then if they see something? Because you don't want to have that attitude, well, I told you so, which is so easy to fall back on. So how do assistants have the courage, have the confidence to go into their executive and say, hang on a minute, I don't think this is going to work?
Right. So the only reason to reflect on what went wrong in last week's meeting is in order to inform next week's meeting. So we need to frame our communication in what's in it for them if they hear me. If they say, in a regular one-on-one, which I hope every assistant has, to be able to say, so listen, John, I'd like 10 minutes to reflect on what happened in last week's meeting, because I'm concerned that will happen again, or I think we can avert that next time. And this is how. And may I share my idea with you? I think it's respectful to ask if we can, if someone is open to hearing feedback. And it could be like, no, I don't have the brain space right now, but why don't we do that at the next meeting? This is about partnership. We keep talking about assistants as business partners. Well, this is how partnerships are built. For our leaders to hear from us, it's not only what you do, but it's what you know. And if it's true that people are saying, you see and hear things that your leaders don't, it's valuable for you to bring that to their attention in the effort to make them look great, in the effort so that next week's meeting goes better. And so when you're sitting at the table at next week's meeting, it could be that your leader then says to you, so Nikki, I know you have some thoughts on that. Can you share it with the group? I know you have some information about that. I'd really be interested in you sharing that with others. So our leaders, when they know that you actually are a thinking person who brings value by what you're observing and what you know, then that changes the game. So this is not about, I told you so. This is about, let's work together to make this better. And this is what I see. And this is what I think could improve the situation. So it's like that. It doesn't have to be mean or loud or ugly or anything. It could be like, it actually could be really fun.
Yeah, and I think as well, a confidence tip I always share is come prepared. If you've already had that conversation with your executive and you hope they're going to follow up with you in a meeting or with other people there, come prepared so you just feel confident to be able to refer to notes or whatever it happens to be that you need to just have that little bit more confidence. I always found being prepared really helped.
Yeah. And in a one-on-one, what I find is many assistants are unsure whether it's okay to speak in a meeting. And so my advice in that situation is when you have your one-on-one with your leader to say, Jill, I really have some information about that project we're working on. When we go into the meeting, how do you feel about me sharing with the group? Are you fine with me speaking up? If I have something to say that I believe would be of value, are you fine with me contributing, or would you rather I not? My advice always is to ask your executive how they feel about it. And I'm betting 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, of course I want you to say something. Of course I do. And then you can train them in this way. And then at the next meeting, they're going to say, to Jill, what I think I see that you have an idea about that. What is it? Come on, speak up. That's what Olympia used to do for me. And I think when in doubt, ask. We can't assume that they don't want you to speak up, and we can't assume that they do. So if you have a question about it, just ask them.
Yeah, and I think that way, if it does take you out of your comfort zone, you've got no excuse then, have you? Because you've asked, you are going to be given that permission to speak. you've got no excuse then to just kind of come out your comfort zone a little bit and go for it. And then you'll notice, exactly as you said, you'll notice the difference. And it's a lot of fun when you are able to share an opinion.
Well, the assistants of the world know so much, but they don't necessarily, they see and hear everything. They have a front row seat for everything that's most everything that's going on in a company, even in the virtual world. My challenge for the assistants of the world is to now say what you see and to speak up, mainly because our workplace is in trouble. And chances are you have information that HR doesn't have and that leaders don't have. And so if you can view it like that really, I believe assistants have an obligation and a responsibility to say what you see. You're being paid by the company, and companies are, some of them are in trouble in certain ways. And I think leaders would benefit from what you know. And it's not only about revealing the problem, it's about coming to the table prepared, as you said, Nicky, with what you see as could be a workable solution. And I've got plenty of those stories in the book. This is not theoretical. This is about real life staff have a lot to say. They have a lot of opinions if only they're asked.
And it brings me nicely to my next question, and really what we were talking about at the beginning of the session around some of those topics that are hard to talk about and some of the issues that are going on in the workplace that are difficult and are causing problems for so many people. So I wonder if you can just touch on, again, some of the themes that come out of the book and how we can potentially move forward.
Yeah. Well, I felt it was very important to identify the issues that are slowing staff down and stopping them dead in their tracks from doing great work. And things like workplace bullying and sexual harassment and the wage gap, not being paid properly or having to deal with unfair practices in their workplace. These issues are toxic and they cause trauma and they are preoccupying. When any of these damaging behaviors are happening, people, men and women, feel a variety of emotions, sadness, anger, resentment, depression, disillusionment. And I would ask, is it possible to do great work when you're feeling any of those things? If you're sitting there worried about paying your bills, it's not really possible to focus on that Excel spreadsheet or that document you're trying to make. So it is ill-advised for leaders to allow these toxic behaviors to continue in a workplace, but they haven't been trained really to deal with them. And so that's why so many workplaces have these behaviors continue. And for me, the issue why I will not stop talking about these problems is that the trauma of them, the damage done by bullying, for example, does not only last for the day it happens, or the week it happens, or the month it happens. When I ask rooms of staff, how long does the trauma last? They yell back at me, years. They yell back, forever. That cannot be okay with anybody. That something that happens in a heartbeat has traumatic impact for years? No, we can do better. And that's why in Staff Matters, it was imperative that I expose the real life stories of what's happened. The assistant in a staff meeting whose executive comes up behind her and does this, says, "Did you leave your brain at home today?" Like, what's happening in there? Like, who does that? But that's not the only story. You know what I mean? Like, these stories come under the category of you can't make this stuff up. Some people say it another way, but you can't make this up. And what I want leaders to ask themselves is, would you want your daughter, wife, sister to be working for this company? Would you like your son, grandson to be working here? Would you want to work for you? We need a big, giant dose of empathy and to understand these last 3 years have been particularly challenging. People have gone through so much. We hear about a lot of mental health problems in our workplace. It's a different ballgame right now in 2023. And I'm grateful that I had these last 3 years to complete the book so that this can be responsive to this post-pandemic environment, because it's different now. And that I'm grateful that it didn't come out until 2023. My biggest hope, Nicky, is that this ignites conversations between staff and leaders, that there's far too much fear stopping staff from telling the truth about what's really going on. And we don't have time to waste. I urge staff to take action in their workplaces if they see the problems, not only for themselves, but for their kids and their grandkids and the people coming up behind them. You know, the decisions are being made right now that are going to have ramifications into the next decade. And I feel like we have a responsibility to get ahead of it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made such an important point there, because you quite often, when you hear people speak about, particularly around sexual harassment and ways in which women are held back, you often hear men say, well, I've got a daughter now, or I wouldn't like my wife to go through that. And it isn't until they have some kind of significant relationship with another woman that they realize how endemic this is. But you made such an interesting point there. Do you want your son to work in an environment like that, where men have so much privilege? And as a mum of 2 boys, the thought of them going into some of the workplaces that I worked in, where it was a boys' club, is horrific to me. So it's an interesting way you position that there. Think about your sons going into those environments and the influence that has on them. I think that's just such an interesting point. Thank you for picking that up. It's an important one.
I mean, yes, that shouldn't be a big leap to understand. I have asked rooms of leaders, describe to me the best boss you've ever had. And they, it's instant. And then describe to me the worst boss you ever had. And again, it's instant. We remember, we have it inside us. We know when people treat us with respect, and we certainly remember when people treat us with disrespect, don't we, Nicky?
Yeah, it's the Maya Angelou quote, isn't it? Which I think is in the book. It's how people treat you that we remember.
And my goodness, during the pandemic, this is an important point to make. We know that people have been through a lot. People have had loss, great loss, and have, suffered mightily in different ways over these last 3 years. What I have seen is that it's easy to be there for somebody when things are great. But really the test for all of us as humans is, can we show up for other people when things are not going so great? When someone's been part of those layoffs that just happened in great numbers. How about then? How about when someone is dealing with long COVID, and how powerful it is to pick up the phone spontaneously, or send an email just saying, how are you doing? Like it's easier to say, I'm so sorry for your loss, the week someone has had a loss. It's very powerful to, though, check in a month later, 2 months later. Do you want to have a cup of coffee? How are you? That kind of thing. And that's going to be the difference, in my view, going forward.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Well, I want to end on a question that I often ask wonderful thought leaders such as yourself. And I wonder what changes you'd like to see in the assistant industry as we go forward, and some of the exciting things as well that assistants can look forward to.
What I see as the big opportunity, exciting opportunity, is about pipeline. I believe in years past, it was viewed that the assistant role was something of a dead-end job, right? If you're an assistant, that would be it. That's all you get to do. That's your lane. You might rise to assistant to CEO, and that would be your pinnacle. And now it's so interesting. What we're seeing is that assistants are morphing. They're taking certifications in project management. They're getting certified in Microsoft Office. They are making moves that are relevant to their particular company, that there is less of the need to quit, as opposed to speaking with leaders to reveal their ambition and to create a new pipeline that the executive assistants of the world are being viewed as potential for management, and the pipeline into IT and to HR. I believe that this next decade is going to be about building the pipeline, especially as the baby boomers are going to be retiring in massive numbers. There are going to be tremendous opportunity in the administrative roles. It's just a matter of the leaders don't know what they don't know. So if you believe that your leadership is not aware of all your skills and talents that you would love to flex, it's important that you tell them. And I'll help. Yeah. Bonnie at BonnieLowKramen.com. This Staff Matters will help you. I really, this is so much more than about book sales. This is about providing tools to have the conversations that must be had. Silence is not working for us, my friends. It's not.
Yeah. Oh, Bonnie, I could talk to you all day, and I have to completely agree with what you said there. I know, and I think we all do know, how incredibly passionate you are about the assistant industry and everything that you've done and continue to do and inspire so many of us.